a lot of people will, for instance, develop a blog post. They'll spend 1 or 2 hours writing the blog post. They'll spend another half hour or so optimizing it for SEO. You'll spend maybe, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, queuing up some social posts. You'll publish them and then you send it out into the world. And then what do? You just wait a day. And by the next day, you've forgotten about it. You're no longer promoting it. And you waste probably 99% of the value of that content by doing that.
You're listening to the Legal Mastermind Podcast with your hosts, Ryan Klein and Chase Williams, the go-to podcast for learning from the experts in the legal community about effective ways to grow and manage your law firm.
Welcome to another episode of the Legal Mastermind Podcast. This is your host, Ryan Klein, and with me, as always, Chase Williams. And today we have a very special guest, Dan Bryan. He works over at Riddle Brantley. It's a personal injury law firm with different offices in North Carolina. And he is the director of digital marketing over there. How's it going, Dan?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're excited about this one because we're going to be able to have a little bit more of a conversation, a little bit more of our wheelhouse and our background as it applies to digital marketing. And we're going to focus on content marketing and strategies for personal injury, but this could definitely apply to plenty of B2C law firms. But before we proceed, why don't you give our listeners a background on your experience and your, how you got into this field of work?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been doing digital marketing for about 14 years now, a little bit more than that, actually. And my background primarily is in the agency world. But about 5 or 6 years ago, I transitioned to working in the startup industry. And so we were working in online education, B2C, doing a lot of content marketing, a lot of social media marketing, leveraging video. And I really developed a love, at that period for applying, some of these scrappier startup type tactics and strategies to online marketing that I then brought with me when I started in legal, which I only did about a little over a year ago. So I haven't been in legal marketing all that long, but it's been interesting and really cool to me to see how you can apply these lessons of marketing for startups to legal marketing, especially when you're part of a small team or you're a solo practitioner, that kind of thing. That's been really interesting to me. So now I work for Riddle Brantley. We're a personal injury law firm in North Carolina. We have offices in Raleigh and work out of Durham and, throughout the state. So it's been a really great experience. I'm really liking it so far.
So you're one of those rare breeds that lived the agency life and got free, and now you work in-house.
Yeah, and I like to think that I treat our agency partners a little better than some as a result.
That's always good to hear, being on the agency side.
Yeah, it's a tough job, but sitting on the other side of the table is really helpful. And I would encourage any legal marketers out there who are working with agencies to, maybe take a year sabbatical and go work on the other side of the table. And I think it serves everyone pretty well.
And then you pretty much dove headfirst into legal marketing. I know in your pre-interview you mentioned speaking, right, about creating content at the Legal Marketing Association conference in Birmingham?
Yes.
Awesome. Basically just speaking all around content and creating content.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. At the conference in Birmingham, it was all about content. Primarily we focused on social media marketing and how, solo marketers and small teams at law firms can leverage, content on a pretty limited budget, limited resources, but really amplify their reach digitally using some of these scrappier techniques and platforms that are available to them. We talked about that. We talked a little bit about blogging, video marketing as well. Some of the ways that people can really start cranking out content on their own or with a small team of freelancers, whatever it might be. I'm all focused and all about, ways that people can actually amplify their reach, even if they feel as though they're constrained by budget or resources or time. Time is obviously the most valuable thing for any marketer at a law firm. There's never enough, but there are ways that you can, get scrappy, apply some of these kind of lean and mean tools and tactics to really, amp up your reach and amp up your engagement. So that's what we talked about at Birmingham.
I love it. So, diving head first, what are the first steps?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I think is super important for anyone in legal marketing or just digital marketing for that matter to keep in mind there is a real tendency to, honestly waste a lot of the content that, we spend so much time and energy creating. And so a lot of people will, for instance, develop a blog post. They'll spend 1 or 2 hours writing the blog post. They'll spend another half hour or so optimizing it for SEO. You'll spend maybe, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, queuing up some social posts. You'll publish them, and then you send it out into the world. And then what do? You just wait a day, and by the next day you've forgotten about it. You're no longer promoting it, and you waste probably 99% of the value of that content by doing that. And so, at the core of my own sort of approach to digital is repurposing and recycling as much content as possible. And it is a great way, especially for, marketers that work on their own in their own department, or with a very small team, maybe in-house, maybe leveraging freelancers or even agencies. It's a great way to really amplify your reach and create a larger digital footprint than you otherwise could. So I always encourage, legal marketers and other marketers for that matter, who are working online, to wherever possible repurpose and recycle their content. And that's something that we do, for social media. We are cranking out all kinds of posts, reutilizing blog posts even from a year ago that we wrote. There's no reason why you shouldn't be pushing out that content, consistently, continually, using different variations of copy and creative. It's really important. So that's sort of the core of my own approach.
So from that, I definitely have 2 follow-ups already, but I don't want to do repurposing yet, because we're huge proponents of repurposing. And I think that is just absolutely essential for really any marketer to leverage their content to the fullest. But before we do that, you were mentioning freelancers and other agencies. So unless you work at the only law firm in the United States that has lawyers that write the blogs, which you probably don't, how does your content team kind of look? What is it comprised of?
Yeah, so I will say, just a shout out to our attorneys, because, credit where it's due. We do have 2 or 3 attorneys, our managing partner for sure, and then, 2 or 3 others that actually help us put together some content. And that's, obviously super helpful. And, I want to give credit where it's due. So we are lucky in that sense, and probably different, like you mentioned, from other firms where you don't get that, kind of level of cooperation or collaboration with the actual attorneys, certainly not partners. So that's been great for me coming into this role and having that support. That's wonderful. One thing I would quickly say just on that same topic is for, folks who are working with attorneys, and you obviously need the attorneys and their expertise in developing some of these, pretty content specific posts, for instance. I would recommend, if you can't get an attorney to commit to, writing up 1 blog post per month even, or you can't get them to commit to even, 6 a year. These folks are busy. They don't have a lot of time. They're spending time in court. They're spending time, drafting briefs, whatever it might be. Work with them and see if they might be willing to put together just an outline for you. Oftentimes, what we like to do and is really helpful is get, an attorney at the firm to put together just a bullet pointed list of key points, key takeaways that they would want to convey to someone seeking legal services. So I get a bullet pointed list from one of our attorneys of key points, key legal concepts, and then I can sort of write around the edges. And all you really have to do, or all any writer has to do at that point, is just add what I call just fluff. Just make it sound good, dress it up. You can add some graphics, and really you can just write around the bullet points that those attorneys or any other subject matter expert provides for you. So that's a really good thing that I think we're doing that others can make use of as well. Of course, it's sometimes hard to get an attorney to be brief, but that's a whole nother challenge. But as far as what our team looks like today, so like I said, we have a couple attorneys that assist. I actually have, 1 in-house writer, not full-time, but someone that's assisting me with developing content. And she'll typically write, 2 or 3 posts or, maybe geo-specific pages per week. That certainly helps a lot. We try to publish, anywhere from 4 to 5 blog posts a week, and it can be a lot to keep up with, but there's obviously no shortage of things to write about. All you have to do is take a look at, Google search volume, see what people are searching on, and just speak to those needs. But we have 1 person in-house that's helping me. I develop a lot of the content myself. Some of my background is in journalism and writing, so that makes it easier. And then, here and there, we don't have a lot of other freelancers that work with us on written content. But what I do is try to reach out to other law firms, particularly personal injury, for the field that we work in, and work with them on guest posts. And that's not only, important for helping just keep the content funnel full, but you also derive a lot of SEO value. If you can find other firms that have great domain authority, that are, experts in their particular geography, and you can get that important backlink back to your site, it really does wonders. And so we really try to do that as well.
I know that guest blogging and kind of doing, it's a form of outreach that some people would say. So do other law firms that are kind of proactive with their SEO kind of know what you're doing, and are they still on board, or they want to be reciprocated, or they just say no altogether, or you've had success doing it your own way?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of firms don't really know what it is. There's, a certain discomfort with, putting content that's written by someone else up on some of these websites, especially when, the attorneys are involved. They don't quite understand maybe, the concepts of, digital marketing and how important that is from an SEO perspective. But, I have found, that firms, once you explain what you're trying to do, a lot of them do have experience with SEO or are working with SEO agencies that, are pushing them in this direction. I found that they're pretty receptive, in general, as long as you're, polite and, explain what you're trying to do. And honestly, we just emphasize the mutual benefit. So it's not as if, putting a guest blog, one of our pieces on someone else's website is serving us alone. They're getting the content, that we develop. So they're, they have a source of content that they wouldn't otherwise, maybe be able to produce themselves. And then we always reciprocate. So we always offer, them the opportunity to publish a blog post on our site. And, at that point, we can provide a valuable backlink to them as well.
As far as finding the topics, though, so you were saying, you write 4 to 5 times a week. That's definitely, pretty impressive. I think the average agency that works with a lot of law firms, they'll probably offer between like 4 to 6 blogs, apart from like articles or other things that they're doing. In-house, you can do it more. We actually, one of our clients is a personal injury law firm out in Houston, and they have an in-house writer, and they actually write 6 pieces of content every day. And so that gets pretty intense, because they have a specific strategy that they do with that.
Yeah, for sure.
So as far as like a blogging strategy, back in the day, when I say back in the day, FindLaw used to be among the biggest legal marketing agencies. They probably technically still are, but their strategy was always just kind of reporting on whatever the practice area the law firm specialized in. They would kind of just write like random like news or repurpose or regurgitate news. So it'd be like, if it's criminal defense law firm here, they're just going to write about like someone that was arrested, or someone that got a DUI, or a celebrity that was accused of petty theft, and then personal like settlements. So I never really found that to be the best approach to blogging. I wouldn't say that I don't mind it being a part of a blogging strategy, but for it to be the whole strategy just doesn't seem like it makes sense, or it's going to be the most impactful. So as far as your blogging strategy, how do you kind of like switch it up? What are the different topics that you typically write about on a weekly basis?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And we do some, repurposing of news, things that are relevant for our audience locally. If there's a huge, we're obviously personal injury. If there's a huge, tractor trailer wreck, we'll write that up and, do what we can to, just like emphasize the safety aspect of it. So one of the things that I would say is just trying to provide value where you can. And, the straight up news is not necessarily the most valuable thing for your audience. They can get that 1,000 other places, right? But, for us as a PI firm, we really like to emphasize safety. We like to emphasize consumer awareness and, maybe product liability issues. So we're constantly scouring the web for information that people might find helpful concerning product recalls or dangerous drugs or, cancerous chemicals and substances that, may be in your breakfast cereal or maybe in the wine you drink, and bringing attention to that sort of thing. Because, we do product liability cases, we do mass torts, people are interested in this sort of thing. And we try to be pretty light touch at the top of the funnel, trying to just bring people in on topics of interest. We don't do a hard sell. We follow the 80-20 or even like the 90-10 rule, where the content that we put out on our blog, we try to keep it educational. and really reserve that 10 or 20% for the promotional stuff, or really the hard hitting, contact us for a free case review, that sort of thing. As far as other types of topics that we do, I like to look at, and I work with our attorneys on this. I ask them, when you have a PC come in, what are the 5 or 10 most common questions that you're getting about your particular practice area? So, for a lot of our attorneys, it's how much does it cost to hire a disability attorney, or how much does it cost to hire a personal injury attorney? How long will it take for my case to settle? Those sorts of things. And we answer those questions. And it's especially helpful for your blog strategy right now because, as you know, Google is moving to, contextual search results. And so they're queuing up and they're featuring, these rich snippets of content that answers someone's specific question. You can get the answer to it right in the SERP. You don't even have to go to the website, although you can drive a lot of traffic by, positioning your content in those position 0 areas. And we do a lot of that. So, you can use on the SEO side of things, you can use this FAQ markup, as I'm sure you're familiar, and position your kind of FAQ type content to answer those questions for people up front. And, I can't tell you how successful that's been for us. So I guess in answer to your question, the short version would be, we try to provide value first and foremost. It's not necessarily about self-promotion. Try to steer away from that. You can look at our blog right now, and we don't do a lot of blog posts on, new attorney hires. We don't do a lot of blog posts on awards and accolades. We don't do a lot on, new, membership organizations that we may be a part of. We don't even necessarily do a lot of time announcing new practice areas. And maybe, maybe that's not smart, but I think it speaks to what people are actually interested in. And for us, we know our audience isn't going to take the time, if they see that published on Facebook, they're not going to take the time to click that link because they just don't care. So the focus is on, what our audience wants. How can we be educational? How can we do things that are actually engaging? And again, we just try to steer away from being self-promotional at this point, because the point of a blog post isn't to sign a new client right away, although that would be great. And it sometimes happens. The point is just to get them, engaged, increase brand awareness, and, position them, for the next step in the funnel. It's not necessarily a be all end all.
So Dan, do you have any sort of checklist or best practice that you implement for individual pieces of content?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I guess I should be a little bit more systematic in having, more of a checklist. I don't have like a physical list that I go down, but at this point, I've been doing this, like I said, for 14 years. So I have a good sense of, what I need to do for every piece of content that I approach. One thing that I would highly, highly recommend for digital marketers at law firms is, using some kind of tool or platform to organize yourself. So everything that we do in content, whether it's a blog post, it's video, I guess social media to a certain extent, although we can talk a little bit more about how I do that later. But one of the things that we do for every piece of content is put it in Trello. And for people not familiar, Trello is it's a free tool. You can pay a premium for it if you want, but the free or the freemium features are pretty sophisticated. And it's really just a simple tool that lets you organize an editorial calendar. It allows you to kind of track the progress of every piece of content that's in development. And we use that. And there are checklists built into that you can use to make sure that you're doing the keyword research, or, optimizing it once, the draft is done. Maybe it needs to go to an attorney for review. You can move it to the appropriate stage that way. And that's something that we do for pretty much everything that we're developing. So I would definitely recommend that. As far as a specific checklist, like I said, I don't really have one, but I do rely on these free tools. You can use Asana too. It's another good one. Teamwork. There's a number of different tools out there that often have a free version that you can leverage to do that, and I'd highly recommend it.
And then how about, best practices on the actual creation of the content? Do you kind of set standards for your writers, or when you're kind of communicating to the lawyers, like it should be X amount of words? Do you kind of put an emphasis on keywords or internal, external linking? Do you do anything along those lines?
Yeah, we do for sure. So I'm very concerned about the length of content. In general, I think it's pretty important. There's a lot of research that shows that Google is far more interested in long format content than shorter. And so for most of our blog posts, I'm trying to encourage our writers or myself to always hit at least 750 words. For most of our, pages on our website, not blog posts, but we're trying to do at least 1,000 words. And that seems to work really well for us. Keywords I will provide to writers and certainly keep them in mind myself, but more and more as Google and other search engines, become more semantic in the way they approach search. So really trying to speak to the way that a searcher actually phrases a question. More and more people are using voice search now with Alexa and other tools. I focus less on the specific keyword as I do on the types of phrases that people are going to be, using to describe this particular question or problem that they're facing. So I do give people general direction in terms of keywords, but you have to be careful now to not over optimize. Google will actually, pick up on that, and your content, at the same time, just from a user experience perspective, it can get pretty spammy pretty quick. People see through that. They see what you're trying to do. It comes off as, really kind of, it's pretty off-putting. And so we just try to write naturally, sprinkle in those keywords where you can, and, just try to write in a way that addresses how people actually speak or actually think. So we do that. As far as, other aspects of the content, I optimize the content before I send it on to, we have an SEO agency that we work with. I'll send it on to them for sort of a final once over. There are free tools you can use in-house to, help with content optimization. Yoast is one of them. There's a lot of things that you can do and that we're doing in-house, but then we work with an SEO partner and they, kind of finalize the technical aspect of things. And that's how we kind of approach that.
So it sounds like you definitely have process and standards in place.
For sure, yeah. It's not really flying by night. We're not flying by the seat of our pants. We're doing everything, as best we can in an organized fashion. And it's really important just because you spend a lot of time developing content. Honestly, I think in this day and age for digital marketers, if you have limited time and you have limited budget, limited resources like we all do, the best thing that you can be doing online right now is developing, publishing, distributing, and redistributing fresh content. And so that's what we're spending the most of our time on. And if we didn't have the processes in place and we didn't have the organization that we do, it would make our lives a lot harder. And honestly, you wouldn't get the return on it that you do otherwise. So yes, we have processes in place, and I credit a lot of our success to that.
So I think that you kind of created a good segue for me to ask one of my last questions. And it's because content marketing, while it's fantastic, it's a foundation of great digital marketing campaigns, it does take a lot of resources. It takes time and it takes a lot of effort in doing it correctly. And so that being said, I think one of the biggest issues that law firms might face with creating a lot of content is there's a lot of times you come up with all these topics, you write beautiful content that you're sure anyone that would read it would be satisfied with what they're receiving. So what do you do in situations where you produce tons of content, but you just have dozens, if not hundreds of pages that just never really got volume or any search traffic? How do you evaluate them, and what steps do you take to try to get them back on track?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. You have to constantly be evaluating performance. So that's another thing that we do. So we're not flying blind. We rely heavily on Google Analytics, and we're constantly looking to see which blog posts are actually performing, which ones are not. We try to steer away from the types of content, the types of topics that are not performing well. And certainly, we're doing a lot to, try and optimize for search. We're doing a lot, like I said at the beginning, of this conversation, to drive as much traffic as possible, squeeze as much traffic out of every single piece of content that we're putting out as possible. And one of the ways that we do that is by repurposing and recycling content. One of the things that I think a lot of digital marketers, especially, those that are on smaller teams, don't always keep top of mind is that the organic reach on social media in particular is just so low now. It used to be that if you had a Facebook page, for instance, You could publish a post and most of your followers would see it. That's definitely not the case anymore. I know that by like 2016, organic reach on Facebook was, as low as 2%. So you have, 100, Facebook followers, you're only going to reach 2 of those with every post that you're putting out. So I really encourage, publishing every piece of content that you've got multiple times, even per day. It's probably, I think a lot of people would be shocked and maybe scared, quite frankly, if they knew how many times we're publishing, on Facebook or Twitter, or Instagram, whatever, each day. But you really have to now. And so, I think you're right that a lot of digital marketers are spending and probably wasting a lot of time on content that doesn't perform. But I think for the most part, unless the content is really, truly crappy, you can find a way to repurpose it in such a way that over time, maybe not, in the first week or the first month even, but over time, you're going to get a lot of value out of that content simply by putting it out there multiple times, doing it in different ways on different platforms. Repurposing and recycling it effectively is sort of the name of the game. And that's what we found to be most effective for us.
Awesome. One last thing I definitely want to touch on, Dan. I know our time's almost up. You mentioned Trello earlier. That's one of our favorite tools. What other tools are you using to manage this process, and even in social as well? I'd be curious.
Yeah, for sure. So I have, I wish, quite honestly, I wish I was on commission with these folks because I just talk about it everywhere I go. My favorite tool, personally that I use every day in our content marketing is one for social media, and it's for content recycling, repurposing, and automation. And it's called Meet Edgar. Very weird name. But it's a great tool. It's affordable, essentially for law firms of all shapes and sizes. And what you do is you just queue up a bunch of content in there. You put together several variations of each post. You load up your blog posts or videos or other content you want to share, and then you assign it a category. And the tool will actually just, based on a schedule that you put together, it will pull a piece of content from each particular category at each specific time and share it. And it's just like putting your social media on autopilot. It's a great way to repurpose the content, like I was saying, and that's probably one of my favorite tools that we use. Obviously for other aspects, we are using Trello for organization, for keeping us, focused. We're doing that to manage our editorial calendar. I think for, graphics, most everyone, especially solo marketers or small teams, you've got to be using Canva. It's, by far the easiest and I think most effective, robust tool for graphic design. It's free. We pay maybe $14, I think, for premium version, which allows you to do a lot more from a branding perspective and keep things a little bit more consistent as far as the fonts and, logos that you're using, whatever it might be, colors. So Canva is a great one, that I'm using all the time. We use Buffer for other kind of one-off social media scheduling and that sort of thing. I find that's a great tool. All kinds of, there are all kinds of options out there. And there's no one, best way to do anything in digital marketing. And so you just got to kind of experiment with the different platforms and see what works best. I'm constantly starting free trials of this or that just to see if there's something that works better than what we're already doing. And I would encourage everyone to do the same.
So Dan, if people want to keep chatting with you about content or have any specific questions, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, sure. So the best way would probably be email, quite honestly. I'm at dan@justicecounts.com. Otherwise, you can interact with our firm's channels. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, et cetera. That's a great way to get a hold of us as well. I'm on there all the time, just most like anyone. But yeah, those are the best ways to get a hold of me.
Well, thanks so much for your time today, Dan.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to the Legal Mastermind podcast. If you're interested in working with Ryan and Chase, please email mastermind@marketmymarket.com. Make sure to join the free mastermind group for growing and managing your firm at lawfirmmastermind.com. Ryan Klein and Chase Williams are the managing partners at Market My Market, one of the top legal marketing companies in the United States.